Hey, welcome back to Cheating Wife, the best channel for cheating stories. Like and subscribe to the channel for cheating stories like this.
26 years down the drain. Hi. I realize that we are not permitted to provide identities, but I'm thinking entire names. I read a lot of blogs to attempt to catch the spirit of them, but I can't write as vaguely and succinctly as they do. I'm not sure. I'll give it my all. My name is Hector, and I am a Puerto Rican of 47 years old. I believe the term is STBX. My wife Debbie and I were married for 26 years and together for 30. We married in our final year of high school when she became pregnant with our first child. I was fortunate to acquire a position with UPS shortly after college, but we struggled at first. She comes from a traditional Irish family, and they first despised me. But I eventually won them over. Particularly her father. I made certain that she did not have to work. We had 5 children by the time we were 27 years old. There are 4 girls and 1 boy. I was simply lucky that the boy was the first to come out. We argued over money, punishment tactics, and my complaint about the lack of. We have 5 children, and they can be pretty demanding. I tried to assist her as much as I could, but she was still exhausted. But she was everything to me. She was usually in good form. I try as well, but after working as a delivery driver for so long, I'm what they term skinny fat. I have a strong chest, arms, and legs, but a belly. I acquired the horseshoe hairline, so I ate off. Debbie, on the other hand, was everything to me. She was verbally abusive to me at times, and after I had had enough and retaliated, she turned into a cry bully, and I simply gave up. We were the lone married pair in our buddy circle as time passed. Every single one of them divorced. 5 of our married pair friends separated due to adultery on the wife's part, 1 due to infidelity on the husband's side, and the last one because she friend-zoned her spouse. I was opposed to my wife socializing with her newly single pals. That, however, would only create a huge dispute about my controlling her, keeping her as a prisoner, and using her as my own live doll. All of this took me by surprise. The more she spent time with them, the more bitter she became. The children took note. After I got home, I recalled my son and 2 of my daughters battling with her, and as much as I felt their irritation, I chastised my children for shouting at their mother, and when they left the room, I verified their problem, and she informed me that we saw her as a. I asked her where she got this, but she said forget it, shut down, and went away. I distinctly recall D-Day. Debbie was having a good time with her pals. My 3 oldest came into the kitchen as I was cooking and the kids were watching Train to Busan. I assumed they had come to check on the meal, but they all seemed anxious. My kid informed me that they believe their mother is having an affair before I questioned what the problem was. Of course, I didn't believe it at first. I refused to believe it. I shouted at them and said I was going to prove them wrong. I checked the Where's My iPhone app and found her in a pub on the outskirts of town. I got in my pickup and drove away. The pub was full when I arrived, but I saw her group of buddies at the corner booth behaving like drunk. When I approached them, they all became pale, and I felt sick to my stomach. I went outside and strolled around the parking lot since I didn't see her in the bar. An automobile was parked in the far rear corner. The guy in the driver's seat seemed to be asleep. A guy I mistook for a buddy. I approached the vehicle to inquire whether he had seen my wife, but as I got closer, I saw he was receiving a BJ, and the closer I went, the more I recognized the lady in the car. I was virtually standing next to the driver's side window, and no one noticed. I lost my cool. I smashed the glass, took him outside, and was not courteous. Debbie was apologizing all the time. I was shouting at her and kicking him at the same time. Soon after, cops arrived and arrested me for assault and violence. I was in county for a week and a half. I had to go to the emergency room because I believed I was having a heart attack, but it turned out that I had broken heart syndrome. The story of what I did spread like wildfire, and my father-in-law ultimately bailed me out. When I walked through those gates, the guy was virtually in tears. He apologizes excessively to me for his daughter's behavior. During the way home, he informed me that he had discussed the problem with my management and union agent, and that I would be able to maintain my job. He said that the children were staying with him and that Debbie was waiting for me at the home. He said that he knew what was going to happen and that is why he brought the vehicle. He was correct. Debbie hurried up to me, weeping, and wanted to embrace me, but I pushed her so violently that she fell on the ground. She stared at me with surprise. I told her to get out of my home and that I wanted a divorce. She attempted to resist, but her father persuaded her differently. My mother-in-law arrived an hour later with the kids, and I embraced them all tightly. Before departing, She apologizes for her daughter's acts as well. In my state, couples therapy is now required before issuing a divorce. Which, in my view, is just nonsense. I'm not sure why I need to go to therapy if she cheated. I simply sat there at the start of the sessions. I'm watching her dribble. Dribble was precisely what it was. The blame was shifted since we were young parents and she had never experienced the wild lifestyle. She got carried away with freedom. She became engrossed in it, and her friends encouraged her. She soon realized she was lacking something, so she began a fling. The counselor attempted many times to blame it on me, telling me that I should have let her expand her wings more often and that I needed to see things from her perspective. I just glanced at the lady and inquired of the counselor if she was using crack. Because it was the stupidest thing she could have said. Debbie told me she had been cheating on me with him for 4 months and claimed that he was the only one. But that was a mistake, and we can go on because we have history. So I pushed her further. Who started the, you or him? How many times did you humiliate him? Did you take a swallow? Was he rough on you? Did he enter you? Did they both fall asleep at the same time? She answered them honestly through her tears, and I was silent for a long time. During this, the counselor attempted to speak to me twice, and I raised my finger each times. I reflected on all we had done before and throughout her affair window. The laughing, the chats. Everything seemed okay, and there was no sign of her being upset or furious. We were simply being ourselves. When I eventually spoke up, I brought up the times we had during that window. I called her a WHRE, the counselor attempted to correct me, and I ordered her to shut up as I called her every word in the book. I eventually informed her she was contaminated in my opinion. Again, the counselor and Debbie attempted to persuade me that our history and relationship could move on from this error, but I didn't want to hear it. It felt as though they didn't care about my sentiments regarding the situation. It was all about forgiving her and figuring out what I could do to go on and apologize to her for making her feel like a servant. So I walked away. For the last 2 years, this contentious divorce has been an uphill fight. Debbie is still attempting to make things right, or to reunite us. I'm not sure why, since our discussions are always about the kids, and when she tries to speak about anything else, I hang up. At family occasions, I either ignore her or don't show up at all. Our older children will not speak to her. I attempted to force them to spend time with their mother, but they refused, and I decided to respect that. My in-laws visit me once a week, and I know they've been trying to get their daughter to grant me my divorce, but it hasn't worked. My mother-in-law has been very harsh with her. Her congregation was chattering about her, calling her a foolish brat. I had to urge her to stop since I didn't want the whole town to know what we were up to. My son and daughter set up a Tinder account for me within the first year. I felt that was stupid since I'm a middle-aged guy with 5 children and a dad bod. Nonetheless, I've had a number of pretty successful dates that have given me a lot of confidence. I just met someone while doing community service for the court. Isabel was our Habitat for Humanity supervisor's name. She's stunning, and she and her kid won first place in a Vanessa Marcel lookalike contest at a soap opera convention. That's how we got started. My girls like watching General Hospital, so I sat next to them. This is one of the rare opportunities I get to spend time with them. 6 months in, I introduced her to children, and they immediately took a like to her. To make matters even more unpleasant, my kid and her daughter look to be really fond of one another. Debbie, on the other hand, refuses to let go. She even assured our 2 youngest children that we will get back together someday. I had to urge her to stop saying this to them. Her father is pressuring her to visit a therapist, but I just want this to be finished. I have no regrets about my time with Debbie. With her, I have 5 amazing children. I grow up and make a life for her. My main regret is that she shattered 26 years of marriage with a fling. I'm sorry she thought she had me so convinced that I'd simply let it go and take her back. However, I despise her. When I run into some of her old pals around town, instead of their names, I freely refer to them as WHREs and homewreckers. That love and respect I had for her vanished the moment I caught her in that automobile. She will always remain my children's mother and nothing else. I just hope she can come to grips with it. Update: I'm hoping that here is where updates will be posted. Please accept my apologies if it isn't, and please accept my apologies if this seems nonsensical. I'm exhausted, sitting in the hospital on my 3rd can of bang, waiting for my ex to be admitted to a mental institution. Isabel is sleeping with me and hasn't left my side since my girls returned home. My youngster stayed with his mother when she left the hospital. His girlfriend/daughter Isabel's has also been at his side. Last weekend marked the beginning of this nightmare. The week before was my in-laws' 55th wedding anniversary, and they requested me to bring Isabel. They have politely requested me not to bring her to events since we made it official, and I have complied. They asked whether she could come this time. My ex has been acting strangely for the last month. She had multiple violent fights with former pals. One of them injured his nose, another broke his lip, and the last was forced out of a Circle K. Every time the police were called, despite the fact that our county was tiny, they just escorted her to her parents' home. I tried convincing my in-laws that she needed to be transported to the hospital for examination, and it even became into a yelling fight, but in the end, I gave up. I should have pushed harder. On Saturday, we all showed up for my anniversary laws celebration, and Debbie seemed strange to me. I drew her to the side, and it was the first time I talked to her. I asked her if she was okay, and she feigned a grin to assure me she was, but when I called her on it, she sobbed a bit. She expressed her regret. She was perplexed as to why she didn't advise her former pals to back off. Or why she succumbed to peer pressure. She informed me that she had wrecked our family and that seeing me with Isabel made her miss me even more and wish she had valued what she had. When she stated it, I felt worry or anxiety in the pit of my stomach. I should have continued to inquire about her well-being, but I was taken aback when Debbie publicly apologized to Isabel for her behavior and begged her to keep me happy since I'm a decent guy who deserves a nice lady. Debbie approached each of our children throughout the celebration, and I can see them making amends with her. I'm not sure what they said, but they kissed and held her. They were chatting and laughing, and they even posed for a few photos. Isabel and I were having a fantastic time, and for the first time, I considered having pleasant talks with Debbie. It was 3 a.m. when I received the call. My sister-in-law was screaming in fear, my mother-in-law was weeping, and my brother-in-law was attempting to calmly inform me that Debbie had attempted suicide and that they were on their way to the hospital. I dashed out the door in my PJs. Isabel and my girls didn't need to inquire what occurred since my side of the discussion painted the picture and my daughters were in a lot of pain. Debbie cut her wrists and would have died if her brother hadn't needed to use the restroom in the middle of the night. My in-laws were not feeling well when I arrived at the hospital. She had lost a lot of blood and was in surgery to have the arteries repaired. I should have phoned my kids, but my head was elsewhere. It took me seeing my son casually come towards me to inquire why I was at the hospital to realize what had occurred, and I tried not to weep as I told him what had happened and he hurried into the OR. I phoned the rest of my children, who were already aware. They were nearly to the hospital when my youngest phoned. My father-in-law and I gave our blood for her after she was in surgery for 6 hours since the hospital was low on her blood type. My kid was unable to participate in the procedure, but he did see it. My girls were all struggling. My oldest daughter, in particular, kept harping on the could've, should've, would've, and I advised her to concentrate on the present rather than the past. My 3 younger daughters were pacing about, and when my son exited the OR, he assured us that she would be okay, and as I held him, he sank into my arms, sobbing. I wanted to weep too, but I needed to be strong for them. My mother-in-law discovered the suicide notes late Sunday. She made one for each of the children and a large one for me. My divorce papers and an 8-page letter of apologies were in my package. The letter simply confirmed that she was never dissatisfied with our marriage. She just succumbed to social pressure and was brainwashed into believing she was a servant by her so-called pals. She apologized profusely for how she treated me, the kids, and for having the affair. Though I'm paraphrasing. When Debbie awoke, she refused to speak and instead stared out the window. It continued like way for 2 days, and it was at those times that I inquired about how to update. I needed to be distracted. She gradually started to acknowledge everyone, but she remained aloof. She almost seemed sad that she was still alive. She didn't improve with time, but she did get more conversant. Debbie requested a private conversation with Isabel. She informed me when she came out that Debbie had asked her if she loved me because she could see how much I loved her. Isabel told her she loved her. I told her I was the first guy she had been with since her husband died in Afghanistan 15 years ago. She wondered whether Debbie was correct. I did love her, and I admit it. This pleased her. Debbie will be admitted to a psychiatric facility for observation. Her parents were advised by the doctor that she may not be freed for a year or 2. She's no longer my wife or the woman I committed my whole life to, but she's still the mother of my children, and I'm going to make sure she gets well for the sake of our children.